So the best way to get to the Women Supporting the Arts grant application is to go to Google and type in martinartsfoundation.org, or I'll send a follow-up link too, but that is the easiest way to get there. And the internet doesn't want to go there right now. There it is. And then when you see the menu bar, you go to Women Supporting the Arts and click on the grants, the little plus button next to the grants, and go to WSA grant applications and guidelines. So once you are there, you will see all the details, most of which I'm going to touch on as I go through the actual application. But there is a budget form that is required. We require a brief resume and bio or organizational history. If you're representing a nonprofit with the application, we ask for a board of directors list and a copy of the 501c3 letter from the IRS. We've changed this year and there's no requirement for hard copies of the grant. This is just an online application, and when you press submit successfully at the end of it, you will get an immediate email with everything that you've entered in here. And because it is dropping text into a box, I think it's probably best if you write up the answers to the questions in another program like Microsoft Word, and then copy and paste those into the actual application.
Repeat that again.
I think it's best. Pardon me?
You want to do it in, we should do it in Word and then cut and paste?
Yes, into the application itself. So some of the things Women Supporting the Arts does not fund is anything that's retroactive, any deficit reduction, anything that's a religious or political purpose, no general operating support, and no food and beverages or private entertainment that might be associated with your events. There's some tips here on completing your project budget, but I will talk about those too when we do the budget form. And you can see this big blue button right here. You can download the required budget form, and then when you go to click apply for a WSA grant, you'll see at the end where we ask you to re-upload the project budget completed. So does that all make sense?
Yeah.
I'm going to go through the whole application and then do the budget at the very end. Once you submit the application at the end, there's no turning back. It's submitted. You can't go back and change something. It's done. So if you needed to change something or decided you wanted to, you could send another application and tell me to delete the original one if you felt like we needed to. And I'm always happy to talk on the phone or exchange emails about ideas that you have for a grant, and happy to help you through all of those things. The deadline is September 18th. And it's, again, just this online form is all that's needed, nothing else. So I am going to do some typing as I talk and fill in the form. You can see on the form there's places where there's an asterisk. That means that field is required. If you get to the end and press submit and it doesn't submit, it's probably because there's some required field that you didn't enter, and so you just need to scroll back up through the application until you see that part. So obviously your name and address are required. Of course, for me, talking and typing is going to be a challenge throughout the whole thing, but we'll get there. 4994. Phone number. email. All right, so now into the meat of it. That's all pretty self-explanatory. First thing is to name your project. I've made up a very creative project name, test project. And I'm just, for simplicity's sake, going to say that I'm asking for $1,500 and that my project budget is $3,200. The next thing is saying whether it's performing arts, visual arts, or literary arts as a general overview and discipline. My test project is in the performing arts. And the project type, here where there are all these squares, you can pick as many of these that apply as possible. Mine happens to be performance, but it might be performance and arts education. You know, when you look at Stewart School of Music and some of those groups that do master classes and a performance, you know, that would be both of those things. Sometimes it might be a publication and an exhibition. So all of these things can combine depending on what your project is. So for argument's sake here, I am going to provide a brief description of this project. And here, brief is better. This is what we'll pick up when we're talking about your project in the post. Should it be accepted and receive a grant, when we announce the winners, you know, we will use this project description here. You don't want it overkill here, but just a very short and simple description works best. So I'm pretending that we are applying for Shakespeare in the Park, even though I spelled that wrong, which is something I would love to see happen. And I'm going to say that my organization's budget is $250,000. We were founded.
Is that now the budget for the entire project that you're?
It's the project for the entire organization. So, you know, if it was a Kiwanis project, if Kiwanis has an annual operating budget, that number would go in there. The project budget goes up here under its.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
And then the project budget. I will say here, you know, it's easiest to fill this in if you've already done the downloaded project budget form so that you know the answers to those questions.
Sense. Yeah.
Here we are just curious if you've received a grant from Women Supporting the Arts in the past. In this case, I'm going to say no. So I'm just going to delete. These are automatically filled with 2019 just because that was the most recent year. If you received a grant last year, you would put in the amount and move on from there. We want to know how many people may be served with this project. So I have no idea, but we're going to say 1,500 people. This is a new project. If it's not a new project, it doesn't have any specific impact on whether it might be funded or not. It's just good information for the grant reviewers to look at, whether this is a brand new concept or whether there's some history with what you're doing. I know that the Indian River Pops and New Gardens Band has brought Copeland Davis to town before. We funded that a couple of times, you know, so it would just be, no, this isn't a new project, and how long it's been going on. We want to know the geographical area that will be served. So, you know, this, I think, I would type in Treasure Coast because it's a regional program. Sometimes it might just be Hobe Sound, might be the answer to the question, or Stewart. And then if there are any similar services in our area, we ask that you type that in too. And in this case, I'm just going to say not applicable, which is, if there aren't, that's perfectly okay to say. At this point, does anybody have any questions?
Yes, I do have a question. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to ask it, but when we were listing the different types of projects, you know, performance or literary or any of those things, if it's something that doesn't quite fit into those, for example, we were thinking about, since this is such an odd season for performing, you know, and we didn't know if anything's actually going to happen. We were thinking of maybe that this would be a good time to try to rebrand, do some rebranding of the New Gardens Band and the Indian River Pops by trying to join them more closely. Would that be something that would be applicable, or do we need to stay with an actual concert format in order to qualify for one of these grants?
I'm going to say yes and no. I mean, I think the artistic discipline refers to the New Gardens and Indian River Pops are performing arts organizations, and so I would still pick the discipline is in the performing arts.
Okay.
And then under project type, I would say that a project like that would fit under professional development.
Okay. All righty. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So we'll go on to the grant narrative. This is the meat of the grant application. We ask first for the project details. These are the who, what, when, where, why of what you're doing. And here I ask that you assume that the person who's going to be reading this grant knows nothing about what you're doing or what your organization is. When you assume that they have no history, then that gives you the opportunity to tell the story of who and what you are. So I'm just going to say, you know, we have Shakespeare performing Macbeth 3 times in Memorial Park. I'm obviously being far briefer than I would be if I were really writing this grant. If there were going to be auditions, I would probably tell you where they were and when they were going to be. I would talk about any stage setup and other technical details. And then I would say all of Martin County is invited on picnic blankets and chairs. Obviously, that's much briefer than I would really do it, but I think you get the point that you get to really describe the whole concept of what you are bringing to the table here. Under community need, this is kind of the why. You know, why does this particular project need to be done? What is the overall value to our community? This is a great chance for you to be compelling about what your organization or your artistic project is doing, why this project, and why you. You know, why are you the best suited to do this thing? So, you know, in this case, my example of Shakespeare in the Park, you know, no one is currently producing Shakespeare in the Park. And I would probably go on to give examples of how outdoor theater performances are done in communities all over the country and what value that brings to people young and old, being able to have a free public performance and the experience of live drama to everyone, whether they can afford it or not. But I'm not going to go into all those words, typing those while you watch me, because that would be silly. Under project impact, this is an opportunity to talk about both the immediate results from the project as well as long-lasting impacts that are anticipated. You know, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to educate an audience about something? Are you trying to change behavior or communicate a particular message? Are you trying to improve a park through the arts that give young people with of all abilities the chance to experience something beautiful, you know? So it's,
Beautiful. I'm quoting you here.
you know, and again, this Shakespeare in the Park example, you'd probably do something that we intend it to be an annual production, and again, talk about the crowd that we expect to have and why it would be a good added addition to the communities and many arts and cultural activities. In partnerships and collaborations, we would want to talk about any partners and collaborations that you have related to the project. If there aren't any, that's perfectly okay as well. But we're really looking for legitimate, true partners who are engaged in the project. For example, well, I mean, there's so many examples, but for this, you know, there wouldn't be this project, the Shakespeare in the Park. It might be the city of Stewart is a partner because providing the park and bringing kids from their after school programs, and that we're bringing it to them specifically. So you would name things like that here. And if you do have partners, I find it very helpful to include a letter of support or some other documentation as one of your attachments there, that you'll be able to have an opportunity to do, just because it gives validation to the whole concept that you're not dreaming that you're going to have these partnerships and collaborations, that they do actually exist and know that they're going to be working with you on this project. You'd be surprised how sometimes that happens. At this point, do you have any questions?
I'm going to have to log off. I know I'm really jumping here. I've not been introduced to this concept. What are the budget, what are the grant opportunities in terms of dollars?
The average grants, I would say, I mean, the grants have ranged somewhere between $150 on up to $9,000,
Wow.
but the average grant is probably in the $1,400 to $1,500 range.
And that meshes well with what we had in mind. So, okay.
Remember, I didn't say this at the beginning, but Women Supporting the Arts is a group of community women who all chip in $1,000 a year. Anyone can join, and then they do this collaborative grant process to collectively, through consensus, give these dollars back out to improve our overall arts community.
That's beautiful. And
it is a beautiful thing.
We would love to have that relationship. I do have to log off. I'm so sorry.
No problem, Sharon.
On this calls. Nice meeting you. Bye.
All right. So we will carry on from here. The last section of the actual formal application are the attachment sections. You can see here we are asked to attach the budget file, which I'm going to do, but I'm going to circle back and actually walk through the budget after I'm done with the application. But for now, I'm just going to attach that there. And then you are given an opportunity here as well to write any narrative to go along with that budget, should you desire. It is not a required field. The budget narrative may help you describe some of the specific budget line items that you think need clarification or further information for members of Women Supporting the Arts to understand. And you can be as long or short on that as you desire. The other section that's required is either a resume, CV, bio, or in the case of an organization, an organizational history. Again, these do not need to be more than 1 page long, but we do like to have that background for each of the applicants. And then there's an opportunity for additional attachments. This is where, for the nonprofits, I mentioned earlier that we require a board list and the copy of the 501c3 letter from the IRS. You would attach these here. And then any other letters of support might be attached here. Things such as photos of past projects, if that relates. But we do ask that you limit your additional attachments to a maximum of 6 items. If you have multiple letters of support from a variety of people, you might want to save them as a single document and just upload them as letters of support separately, and then the budget separately, or not the budget, but the board list and the IRS 501c3 letter separately. So in this case, I'm just gonna grab a file here so that I can press submit and show you what happens. Of course, I can't use my mouse. I'm just gonna attach the budget again because it's easy. So now we press submit, and I left the field empty. Organizational history for test application. So you can see that's what happens. If it doesn't let you submit, it pops up with the red next to that field name. I will try to hit submit again. It's going to upload the documents, and then you get this page with a message tracking number, a thank you for submitting your request, and a confirmation of your name, project name, and the amount requested. The email will have come into my email immediately afterwards, and it will have verbatim of everything that I typed into the application. So I am going to stop sharing this screen, and I'm going to share the budget form so we can look at that. Are there any questions before I go on to the budget? Okay. The first part of the budget template asks for just any other funding and project support that this grant may have. If you know where it's coming from, if you've asked a bank for a grant or any individual donors, we don't necessarily need them by name. You can say an individual donor, and whether it's just been requested. As I've said here, we've asked XYZ Bank for $500 in August of 2020. And then I have $500 that's been committed in August of 2020 by some individual donor. And that just gives, again, our reviewers an opportunity to see that what else may be coming in to support this application. The second part of the budget is the actual budget, where we talk about expenses and income. There are formulas in this budget already preset, so you do not need to do the math yourself by dropping the numbers in. And you can see I've already put these numbers in here, so I'm going to take them out, and you can see here that now that I took the numbers out, there is no longer any grant expenses totaled here as to what is being requested from WSA. So when I put the $1,000 back in for an artist stipends, and I put $500 back in for the equipment rental, it populates for a total of $1,500. I put in all my other expenses here that aren't being asked from Women Supporting the Arts, and any in-kind donations over here. It takes automatically the total of these 3 columns and puts the total project budget in here. As I'm talking about in-kind donations, it's important to note that those show up on both the expense budget and the income budget, because it's a service that you otherwise would have had to purchase. So it's an expense, but it's also a donation because you're not having to spend that money on here. So you see I have $200 under marketing and publicity under in-kind, and then I've got $200 here under private and individual support because it's a marketing and public relations consultant that's providing services. And so it goes under individual support here. So on the income side, you will put in whatever other income you have. You'll put in the total grant amount requested, which was $1,500. And you can see that the total project budget and the total project revenue balance. This is what we like to see, is the two categories balancing out. Most budgets should balance. It does not mean that you will be punished if your admissions end up being $5,000 and not $500, and you make gross profit on that you're able to reinvest in the projects of your organization. That's perfectly fine. But for budgeting purposes, this is what your best guess at what is going to happen with this project is going to be. So you save this and then you upload this document with your application when you are finished with it. This is, I have completed all the items I wanted to cover with both the application and the grant budget. I will encourage people to call me with questions that are not watching this live, but are watching it as a recorded function. There were a lot of budgets, nearly 50% of them last year, I needed to redo and make alterations so that they were how we wanted to see them presented. So I'm happy to review those in advance if you'd like to share those with me. But I will also be reviewing these before they are given to members of Women Supporting the Arts to make sure that they are correct before they get to be reviewed. I may not do them for you this year. I may just send them back to you asking for a revised budget, but I will work with you to make sure that they are correctly presented. Are there any other questions? Hearing no questions, then I guess we will wrap up today's presentation about applying for a Women Supporting the Arts grant. I encourage you again to reach out with project ideas and questions about the process. The applications, I will remind you, are due on September 18th using this online form only. It is very simple, as I think you have seen today, and pretty straightforward. And I wish you the best of luck in all that you're doing and with this application in particular. I can be reached at Nancy Turrell, so nancy.turrell, Turrell, at martinartsfoundation.org, or I can be reached by the phone at 772-288-5397, extension 4. That's 288-5397, extension 4. And of course, there's ways to contact us via the website as well if you missed any of that information there. Thank you for watching and participating today. And
Nancy, I really appreciate it. Thanks. Very informative. Thank you.
oh, my pleasure, Joanne. And thank you all. I'm